For most of the 1980s, if an American student went off to college, the chances were better than 2 to 1 that the typewriter in the trunk of the family car came from upstate New York. From a single factory complex in Cortland, where 4,000 people came through the same gates their parents came through, building the machine that every American kid wrote their first college paper on. At its peak, Smith Corona dominated the American consumer typewriter market the way no company had dominated American writing since the pencil. Hollywood writers used them. Hemingway, Truman Capote, Joseph Heller, Dr. Seuss, Tom Hanks. The portable electric Smith Corona was, for 2 generations, the universal American graduation gift, but fast forward to 1995. The Cortland plant is gone. The Groton plant is gone. The company files for bankruptcy in a Delaware courtroom on July 5th. 875 American jobs have already been shipped to Tijuana. The brand that defined American writing for 100 years is sold for parts. Now, there is a simple villain in this story. It arrives on August 12th, 1981, in a beige box that costs $1,565, the IBM Personal Computer. But the truth is more complicated and more damning. Either way, what follows is one of the most preventable corporate suicides in American manufacturing history. To understand what was killed, you need to understand what these factories actually were. Cortland, New York is a town of about 49,000 people in the rolling country south of Syracuse. At the Smith Corona plant on Route 13, 4,000 people built typewriters at the peak in 1974. 4,000 people coming through the same gates their parents had come through, learning their trade from machinists who had learned it from theirs. The building hums before you see the shop floor, the clack of platen rollers being tested, the whine of milling machines cutting type bars. The smell is machine oil and cardboard and the particular weight of things being made to last. In 1956, Smith Corona released the first portable electric typewriter in the world. 19 pounds, just under $200, a machine that traveled. By 1958, the company merged with Marchant Calculators, and sales jumped from $40 million to over $85 million in a single year. The Galaxy, the Coronet, the Classic 12, the Sterling, the Skywriter. Truman Capote ended his career on a Smith Corona Electra. Joseph Heller used a Smith Corona Classic. Tom Hanks's lifelong typewriter obsession started with a Smith Corona clipper his parents gave him as a kid. These weren't appliances. They were objects of desire, built by hand in upstate New York, and the whole world knew exactly where they came from. By 1974, Cortland employment hits its all-time peak, around 4,000 workers. Combined with the Groton plant down the road, plus a Singapore facility opened the year before, total Smith Corona division. Headcount tops 5,000. The order books are loaded. The empire is at its peak. But here is something I find genuinely shocking the deeper I dig into this story. While the workers on the shop floor take real pride in what they are making, the company above them has already stopped behaving like a manufacturer. The parent firm, SCM Corporation, has spent the late 1960s on a conglomerate buying spree: Glidden Paint, Allied Paper, Procter Silex Toasters, a German accounting machine business, a British paper division, a foods unit. The typewriter operation in Cortland is the cash cow that funds everything else. When engineers in Cortland push for serious investment in electronic typewriter research, the answer from the New York headquarters on Park Avenue is the same answer it always is. Profits up, expenses down, the typewriter business will be fine forever. It is 1974, the plant is full, the order books are loaded, and the people running the company do not yet understand what is about to happen 6,000 miles away in Boca Raton, Florida, where a small team at IBM has just been given an unusual assignment. If you are finding this story as remarkable as I am, hit subscribe. There is a lot more American industrial history on this channel I think you will want to see. In 1981, IBM walked into the room and changed everything. On August 12th of that year, the company unveiled the Model 5150, 16 kilobytes of memory, a 4.77 MHz Intel processor, a keyboard with 83 keys. Price, $1,565. IBM had forecast it would sell 250,000 units in 5 years. It blew through that forecast in months. By 1983, IBM was shipping 40,000 PCs a month and had exceeded its 5-year sales target by 800%. The PC by itself was not the threat. The threat was what came next. WordStar, written in San Rafael, California, was ported to MS-DOS in 1982. Within a few years, it held a clear majority of the personal computer word processing market. Then, WordPerfect arrived from a small office in Orem, Utah. By the late 1980s, WordPerfect controlled over 70% of the office word processing market. Letter-quality dot matrix printers eliminated the typewriter's last advantage. The transition was not gradual, it was a 5-year extinction event. Smith Corona's executives saw the PC coming. That is the part that surprises people. They were not blindsided. They simply made a deliberate, strategic call about what to build next, and that call was catastrophic. They invented something called the Personal Word Processor, the PWP, a typewriter with a small screen, a floppy disk, and basic editing software baked in. It looked like a typewriter, weighed like a typewriter, sold for a fraction of a PC's price. By 1989, Smith Corona was the world leader in PWPs. Inside the boardroom, the thinking went like this. Personal computers are for engineers and programmers. Real writers, students, secretaries, home users, they want a machine that just types. They do not want to learn an operating system. They want paper to come out the other end. The PC is a niche. The PWP is the future of consumer writing. What most people do not realize, and I certainly did not before looking into this, is just how catastrophically that backfires. Those PC users are not staying on expensive office machines forever. They are the next generation. Every 20-something who learns WordPerfect at work in 1986 wants one at home by 1990. By 1993, an off-brand PC clone with a hard drive and a printer costs less than a top-of-the-line PWP. The machine that was supposed to be the safe middle ground between pen and computer turns out to be the safe middle ground between obsolete and irrelevant. Smith Corona is not just losing customers, it is handing them, one by one, to a market it refuses to enter on serious terms. Then, in April 1991, 10 years after the IBM launch, Smith Corona's CEOG, Lee Thompson finally announces a personal computer line. They are called Simply Smart. 7 models, all manufactured in Taiwan by Acer, slapped with a Smith Corona badge. And in the same announcement, Thompson tells the trade magazine Dealerscope the line that will follow him for the rest of his career. He says, "Computers are a logical extension of our line, not a replacement for other products within our line. We strongly believe in the continuing need for the typewriter. We will maintain our lead position in the marketplace." This is 1991. Microsoft Word for Windows has been out for over a year. WordPerfect has more than 70% of Office word processing. Within 4 years of that quote, Smith Corona will be in bankruptcy court. But the worst decision of all has already been made, and it was made in London, not Cortland. In 1986, the British conglomerate Hanson plc, run by Lord Hanson and Gordon White, buys SCM Corporation for $930 million. Within 2 years, Hanson sells off the chemicals division, the Glidden Paints business, Allied Paper, the Park Avenue headquarters, and the foods unit. They earn back the entire purchase price, plus a profit, in 24 months. Smith Corona, the typewriter company, is what is left. A pure financial asset, financialized to the bone, run from London with American manufacturing as a line item. In June 1989, Hanson floats roughly half of Smith Corona on the New York Stock Exchange at $21 a share. 7 weeks later, the company announces 450 layoffs. The stock collapses to $18.25. 2 shareholder class action lawsuits are filed in Manhattan accusing Hanson of misrepresentation. The litigation drags on for 2 years. Smith Corona is bleeding before the 1990s even properly begin. Meanwhile, the company is also locked in a 20-year trade war with brother industries of Japan, filing dumping complaint after dumping complaint at the US Court of International Trade since 1974. They keep winning. They keep imposing anti-dumping duties. And while they litigate, brother quietly builds a plant in Bartlett, Tennessee that makes 600,000 typewriters a year for the American market, sidestepping every duty. By the time Smith Corona and brother jointly asked the Commerce Department to drop all dumping investigations in February 1994, both companies finally seem to understand the same thing. They have been at war with each other for 2 decades while their entire category was being deleted by a software company in Redmond, Washington. If you are finding this story as remarkable as I am, drop a comment below. I would genuinely like to know if you or your family had any connection to these factories. Then, in 1992, the morning shift was called to the cafeteria. It was July 21st. Workers at the Cortland plant were summoned at 9 in the morning to the company canteen. An executive in a suit told them, in the words a Baltimore Sun reporter quoted that week, "Adios." 875 jobs were terminated. All production was being moved to a new plant in Tijuana, Mexico. The expected savings, $15 million a year in labor costs, Mexican wages around $1 an hour, no health insurance. The decision came under the negotiating shadow of NAFTA before the agreement had even been signed. The journalism of that morning is searing. A line worker named Suzette Calkins called it a country and western lament. A 41-year-old worker named Darlene Redmond, who would lose her job alongside her husband Bud over the next 15 months, told reporters, "The government knows what is going on, but they don't care. They give so much to other countries, but they seem to be against the American people." A man identified only as Mr. Luther said, "I've lived in Cortland all my life, so I'll stay in the area, but it's hard to make it around here anymore." Across town, a developer named Tom Barden halted construction at an upscale subdivision called Walden Oaks that overlooked the factory. A pending $180,000 duplex sale to a Smith Corona employee collapsed the next day. The county economic development chief, Dick Elliott, told reporters, "Most everybody is going to be affected one way or another." A team at Cornell University, led by Lourdes Ben-Araya in the Department of City and Regional Planning, spent the next 4 years tracking 159 of the displaced workers. The findings, published in 1998, are brutal. Average length of unemployment, 9.5 weeks for men, almost 12 weeks for women. Average annual earnings loss per worker, $8,147. Women lost 35% of their pre-layoff income on average. 42% of laid-off workers fell into the lowest income bracket and only 2% moved up. Cortland County's average wages and salaries fell from $20,487 to $18,487 in 3 years. On July 5, 1995, 3 years after the Cortland announcement, Smith Corona Corporation filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy in U.S. Bankruptcy Court in Wilmington, Delaware. Assets, $207.9 million. Liabilities, $198.9 million. The largest unsecured creditor was Mitsumi Electric of Japan. The CEO, a turnaround specialist named Ron Stengel, had been hired 5 days before the filing. The next morning, the New York Times headline by Lawrence Zuckerman read, "Smith Corona, a computer victim, files for bankruptcy." That headline framed the entire historical interpretation of the company in 9 words. Smith Corona limped through a second bankruptcy in 2000. The company was sold for about $6 million to Pubco Corporation of Cleveland, Ohio. The last white-collar staff in Cortland were wound down in 2001. What ended in Cortland was not just a company, it was an unbroken chain. The engineering knowledge, the supplier relationships, the American component network, the craft passed from one generation of upstate New York machinists to the next. All of it dissolved when the plant moved to Tijuana and the company filed for bankruptcy. You can start a new company, you cannot bring back a chain like that. And here is the final detail that still gets me. Today, there is a company called Smith Corona. It is headquartered in Cleveland, Ohio. It does not make typewriters. It makes thermal labels and barcode ribbons for warehouses and shipping operations. The brand survived by becoming the kind of generic industrial supplier that Hemingway would never have heard of. The original Cortland complex still stands, repurposed as warehousing for filtration parts and yogurt cups and small manufacturing tenants. There is no museum, no memorial. The closest thing to an archive of what happened there is a private Facebook group called Former Smith Corona Workers Reunite, where retired machinists post photographs of typewriters their fathers built. The men and women whose grandparents built typewriters in Syracuse, whose parents moved the work to Cortland, whose children watched it leave for Tijuana. Their story ends in a Delaware courtroom in 1995. The question nobody in power ever properly answers is how the same mistake keeps getting made and who pays for it when it does. American manufacturing has lived this story over and over. A foreign technology arrives, American management refuses to believe it is the future. A foreign or financial owner arrives and treats the company as an asset to be liquidated, not a community to be defended. The plant moves, the town hollows out. The brand survives just long enough to be embarrassing. If you want to see another story exactly like it, about how one foreign owner gutted a different American empire, then the next video on this channel is made for you. Hit subscribe